ago, I was thumbing my way through a Christian magazine called Christianity Today when I happened upon this fascinating little story by John Oakes. It was chilly in Manhattan, but it was warm inside the Starbucks shop on 51st Street and Broadway, just a skip up from Times Square. Early November weather in New York holds only the slightest hint of the bitter chill of late December and January. Still, it's enough to send the masses crowding indoors to vie for available space and warmth. For a musician, it's the most lucrative Starbucks location in the world, and consequently the tips can be substantial if you play your tunes right. Apparently, we were striking all the right chords that night because our basket was almost overflowing. It was a fun, low-pressure gig. I was playing the keyboard and singing backup for my friend who also added rhythm with an arsenal of percussion instruments. We mostly did pop songs from the 40s to the 90s. I didn't know the 40s had pop songs, but anyway, from the 40s to the 90s with a few original tunes thrown in. During our emotional rendition of the classic If You Don't Know Me By Now, I noticed a lady sitting in one of the lounge chairs across from me, swaying to the beat and singing along. After the tune was over, she approached me. I apologise for singing along to that song. Did it bother you? She asked. No, I replied. We love it when the audience joins in. Would you like to sing up front on the next selection? To my delight, she accepted my invitation. You choose, I said. What are you in the mood to sing? Well, do you know any hymns? Hymns! This woman didn't know who she was dealing with. I cut my teeth on hymns. Before I was ever born, I was going to church. I gave our guest singer a knowing look. Name one. Oh, I don't know. There's so many good ones. You pick one. Okay, I replied. How about His Eye is on the Sparrow? My new friend was silent, her eyes averted. Then she fixed her eyes on mine again and said, yeah, let's do that one. She slowly nodded her head, put down her purse, straightened her jacket and faced the centre of the shop. With my 2 bars set up, she began to sing, Why should I be discouraged? Why should the shadows come? The audience of coffee drinkers were transfixed. Even the gurgling noises of the cappuccino machine ceased as the employees stopped what they were doing to listen. The song rose to its conclusion. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free, for His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. When the final note faded, the applause crescendoed to a deafening roar that would have rivaled a sold-out crowd at Carnegie Hall. Embarrassed, the woman tried to shout over the noise. Oh, please, go back to your coffee. I didn't come here to do a concert. I just came in here to get something to drink, just like you. As the applaud continued, I embraced my new friend. You, my dear, have made my whole year. That was beautiful. Well, it's funny that you picked that particular hymn, she said. Why is that? Well, she hesitated again, then said, that was my daughter's favourite song. Really? I exclaimed. Yes, she said. And then she grabbed my hands. She was 16. She died of a brain tumour last week. I said the first thing that found its way through my stunned silence. Are you going to be okay? She smiled through the tear-filled eyes and squeezed my hands. I'm going to be okay. I've just got to keep moving forward and keep trusting the Lord and singing His songs. And then with that, she picked up her bag, gave me her card, and then she was gone. As I said, it's one of those curious kinds of stories that raises so many questions. And not just for the reader or the listener, but also for the writer. Here is how he concludes. Was it just a coincidence that we happened to be singing in that particular coffee shop on that particular November night? Coincidence that this wonderful lady just happened to walk into that particular shop? Coincidence that of all the hymns to choose from, I just happened to pick the very hymn that was the favourite of her daughter, who had died just the week before? Was it just a coincidence? What a great question. So what do you think? Was it? Well, this is what the writer thinks of these kinds of unusual encounters. I refuse to believe it, he says. And why? Because God has been arranging encounters in human history since the beginning of time. So it's no stretch for me to imagine that he could reach into a coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan and turn an ordinary gig into a revival. And so let me ask you once more, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with the writer's perspective that God has been arranging encounters in human history since the beginning of time? And if so, then do you also think that God can not just reach into a coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan and turn an ordinary gig into a revival, but God can take your everyday or somewhat random encounters and turn them into something divine or something heavenly or something that reveals the kingdom of God on earth. I have an unwell friend. His illness is not life-threatening, so it's not fatal, thank God, but it is crippling. His illness rushes over him, and so it's an unwelcome intrusion that cripples him for short periods of time. And because of the nature of his illness, there's also been times when he's had to be hospitalised. Yet, despite all the medical attention that he's undergone, the best that the medical fraternity have been able to offer him is a management strategy. Over the Christmas period, my friend decided to go on a holiday, a break to get away. And while on holidays, he had an acute attack. So much so that he was rushed to an emergency department. But there in an unfamiliar hospital, an unlikely meeting of sorts takes place. The intern that was looking after him said, "I need to put you in charge of the senior medical person here in this hospital." And so he connected him up with this specialist who came and looked at my friend, who just happened to be the leading specialist in this field, and who says to him, "Hey, we can help you here manage this better than what you have been told." A coincidence, you may say? Chance meeting? Quite possibly. But I also know that my friend has a large prayer network set up, and as soon as he was rushed to the hospital, a prayer alert went out. So maybe our writer friend is onto something. Let me draw your attention back once again to the second Bible reading that was read a few moments ago. Here's Jesus, whom one morning sets out to a tiny little village on the outskirts of Capernaum. And the thing with this town is that unless you live there or have family there, there's no reason to visit it. The town isn't on a trade route of any sort, and really it's on its way to nowhere. Unless you're heading there, to Nain. But off Jesus trods. But not just Jesus, as the gospel writer tells us. Jesus' disciples, as well as a large crowd, went with him. Now, I don't know, but I wonder what the conversation was as they followed Jesus. Where is he going? Are we there yet? Why is he going this way? Isn't this the road to Nain? What's in Nain? Well, as it turns out, a widow who is in much distress is in Nain. Well, not so much in the town, but instead was on the verge of leaving town. And she too was not alone. So how is this for timing? As Jesus and his crowd of followers entered the town gate, at that exact moment, a funeral procession for the widow's son was coming out. And I love this next part of the story because once again, the gospel writer captures not just what is taking place, but the heart of Jesus. And Jesus, on seeing the widow's tears, is overcome with compassion. And not just a little bit of compassion, but a deep sense of compassion. The Greek word that the gospel writer uses here, which we translate as compassion, is it's an incredibly descriptive kind of word. In one sense, our English translations understate the emotion that Jesus is feeling. And so a better translation would be to put his discomfort this way. Jesus, on seeing the woman's grief, feels her pain in the depths of his gut. Have you ever wondered if God cares about your pain or your grief or your heartache? Can I let you in on a little secret? I do at times. And then I'll read a story like this one about Jesus who is overcome with sorrow, with someone who is considered the most vulnerable in society. And I'm reminded again of the enormity of God's love. And coming back to the story I told a little earlier about the woman who sung that rainy afternoon in Manhattan at the Starbucks. Do you remember the song that she had sung? It was "His Eye is on the Sparrow." Do you know the background to that song? The words were written by Sevilla Martin, who along with her husband were good friends of Mr. and Mrs. Doolittle. There we go. It's a true story, supposedly. True story. Now, Mrs. Doolittle had been bedridden for over 20 years, while her husband was paralysed from the waist down, and so had to propel himself each day into a wheelchair just to get around. Yet despite their struggles, the Doolittles radiated a sense of hopefulness. So much so that one day, Sevilla's husband was led to ask them what was their secret. And she replies, well, that's simple. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. Well, that night, drawn to the simplicity and the beauty of those words, Sevilla sits down at the kitchen table and pens these words. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is he. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise, when songs give place to sighing, when hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him. From care he sets me free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I am happy. I sing because I am free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. So do you believe that? Do you believe that God is watching over you? Now, coming back to our Bible story, on seeing the funeral procession, Jesus and his motley crew could have easily just stood aside and let them pass. After all, that would have been the courteous thing to do. But Jesus, it seemed, had other ideas. Rather than standing aside, he did the unthinkable. He not just touches the coffin, but on doing so, he then shouts, "Young man, I tell you, get up." And then to everybody's amazement and fear, the boy does as Jesus commands. He sits up and he begins to talk. Now, what he says or to whom he talks to, we don't know. All we know is what Jesus does next. On seeing the boy sitting up, Jesus gives him back to his mother, who I'd imagine just be overwhelmed and with awe and wonder and shock at what's just taken place. What's just happened here, I imagine her saying. Well, what happened? I think the crowd says it best. This is what happened. God has visited his people today. God has visited his people today. Seems that I've asked you a lot of questions this morning, but since I'm on a roll, here's another one. Do you think that God continues to visit his people today? Now, prior to entering the village of Nain, Jesus was in Capernaum, which is about a 10-hour walk from Nain. And while there, he was approached by some well-respected Jewish elders who wanted Jesus to go with them to the home of a Roman soldier. And they wanted Jesus to go with them because one of the soldier's highly valued slaves was very sick and near death. So they earnestly begged Jesus to help the man. And they wanted Jesus to help him because of this man's love for the Jewish people. Now, the gospel writer, Luke, he informs us that this soldier had built a synagogue for them. And so if anyone deserves your help, they say to Jesus, he does. Now, let me pause here for a moment. Might be helpful to know that I've grown up in the church. And so I've heard or read these stories countless times. And because they are so familiar to me, it becomes easy to miss or to gloss over those things that are shocking in the text or are hard to reconcile. And I say this because despite preaching on this text countless times over the last 28 or so years, I've never stopped to think about the power imbalance that's occurring here. Here is a man who is well respected, yet owns slaves. And to make the matters worse, his concern for the slave who is sick is not because he cares for the slave, but because the slave is valuable to him. Or to put it another way, the soldier is worried about the financial loss or loss of work output that he might incur if the slave dies. Yet, despite this, how does the gospel writer describe him? Well respected. And so I think there's a warning for us today that was possibly not there when the text was written. And this is the warning. You can be seen as a God-fearer. You could be a follower of God or a follower of Christ. Or you could be a Christian leader and yet be blind to injustice. Well, maybe the gospel writer understood this. Because the other thing that's odd about this story is that despite the Roman soldier being a Gentile, that is, one who stands outside the acknowledged community of faith, he is warmly welcomed into the faith. And what I mean by this is that Luke goes to great lengths in telling us about the well-respected Jewish elders who not only befriended this man, but who pleaded with Jesus to help him. If anyone deserves your help, they say to Jesus, he does. Wow. You know, what can we learn about the inclusive nature of God here? After all, I don't know, but I think all of us, or most of us, know someone, persons who are estranged from or do not feel welcomed into a community of faith, or into the Salvation Army even. So here's another question. How then can this story invite us to imagine ways in which we might be called to give voice to the longings and perspectives of those who stand outside our faith communities, but also long to know God's mercy and healing? So coming back to the story. Here we have a Roman soldier whose slave is sick. And so what does he do? He sends some well-respected Jewish elders to Jesus, asking that they would plead on his behalf. And Jesus not only listens to them, but is happy to go with them to the soldier's house. But before he arrives at the house, the officer sends some more friends to meet with Jesus. But this time his command is different. Rather than inviting Jesus into his house, he has them say to Jesus, Lord, so there's a mark of great respect for Jesus, Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my home, for I am not worthy of such an honour. I'm not even worthy to come and meet you. Just say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed. And how does Jesus respond to this request? Surprisingly, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Turning to the crowd that was following him, he said, I tell you, I haven't seen faith like this in all Israel. And when the officer's friends returned to his house, they found the slave completely healed. So let me just give you 2 quick points and then I'll wrap up. Firstly, enslaved people in Jesus' day were considered a non-entity. That is, they had no status as a human being. Instead, they were considered the same. This sounds terrible as it's about to come out of my mouth, but they were considered the same as what you and I would consider a kitchen utensil. Yet, despite the enslaved person's status, Jesus heals him. There are times when you and I may feel unseen by God, or by the church, or by our family or friends. And you may feel this simply because of your circumstances. But what this story teaches me is that we should never underestimate Jesus' love for the whole of humanity. Or more to the point, for you. Jesus' love for you. My second point is this. We make a big deal about the soldier's faith in the story, and we do so because Jesus makes a big deal about his faith. So I don't want to diminish the role of faith in the story. After all, there's no denying that this man has much faith. Yet, here's the thing. Jesus responds to the Roman soldier long before learning of his incredible faith. From the outset, Jesus was going to heal the soldier's servant. Because if he wasn't going to heal him, he never would have gone with the Jewish elders in the first place. So what can we learn about Jesus at this point? Well, let me be blunt. Jesus is coming for you. Jesus is coming for you. And not to destroy you or to bring judgment against you, but to save you and to bring you life. Life in all its fullness. A rich and satisfying life. And so if the worship team would like to make their way back to the platform, and as they do, I'll finish with this. Now, flipping back to the story about the widow of Nain, what I love most about this story is the image of the widow who, in her grief, is walking towards Jesus. Now, when Jesus blocked her path, had she walked around Jesus or turned away from him or ignored the one who could bring healing and hope and restoration, had she done that, all that was left for her was a burial ground. Now, please don't let death have the final word. Rather, despite what it is that you face, keep walking. Keep responding. Keep moving towards Jesus. And run if you have to. And in doing so, this is my prayer for you, that you will crash into the arms of Jesus, who, by the way, just happens to be coming the other way. May God bless you.